One of the first rules of retail: the customer is always king. Even though about 60% of retail shoppers are women.
The way I look at it, my wife's a magician. She gets brand names at low prices, and she can turn shampoo and toothpaste into a set of wrenches. She says it isn't magic. She says it's smart shopping and belonging to Zellers Club Zen.
Only at your store, Zellers has the lowest prices of all every day.
Welcome to another episode of Later That Same Life. I'm Larry Fedorik, and on my weekly podcast, topics, discussions, stories from our lives.
Season 8, Chapter 7.
The Return of Zellers. Most of my podcast listeners are Canadians, but if you are not, you might have a tougher time understanding the excitement surrounding the return of a Canadian retail department store chain known as Zellers. And when I say excitement, it's more like a controlled hoopla, a subdued anticipation, more than just a passing interest in the resurrection and revival of this retail brand, Zellers. A little history. There was a Zeller, Walter P. Zeller, who set up his first thrifty department store in London, Ontario in 1928. Walter Zeller was a driven individual, inspired to succeed after always being called last during grade school morning roll call, even after Wanda Zaberski. In his final year, Walter suggested that roll call be done by first name, so for 1 year he was called second last, just ahead of Wanda Zaberski. I cannot authenticate that last bit of data. Nevertheless, interesting that Zellers, named after founder Walter Zeller, does not have an apostrophe in its corporate name and logo. I mean, his name was not Walter Zellers. His name was Zeller. His store, Zellers, possessive apostrophe, Zellers. But it seems they have forgone the apostrophe, perhaps to pass those savings on to you. You know who else does not have an apostrophe in their name where they really should? Tim Hortons. Also Popeyes. Little Caesars. Oh yeah, it's a travesty. Who does have an apostrophe in their corporate name and logo? Wendy's. Also McDonald's. Denny's, Lowe's, Arby's, Reese's, Kellogg's, Macy's, even Levi's. Not Zellers. I just think if we're going to spend our hard-earned dollars, perhaps we should spend it with companies who show a concern for proper punctuation. I mean, if they don't care about punctuation, what other quality assurance details may be absent? Well, you see my point. So, Zellers, out of London, Ontario, it expanded to Toronto, Quebec, and then the Maritimes. Later, they slowly expanded westward as well. There were a few acquisitions and reacquisitions along the way, but I'll spare you the boring business details. Mostly what a lot of us remember is that in 1978, they were acquired by HBC, the Hudson's Bay Company. Incidentally, Hudson's Bay Company is its proper name, with an apostrophe. Hudson's Bay Company, as most Canadians know, is one of the oldest retail chains in the world and certainly the oldest company in Canada. Centuries ago, started out as a fur trading venture, a business model based on ripping off indigenous peoples, exchanging piles of valuable beaver pelts, a stack of which had to be the same height as a rifle. Same height, because that's a fair trade, right? They sold the famous Hudson's Bay blankets, which in the 17 and 1800s were rumored to be used to spread smallpox among First Nations peoples. Indigenous peoples have an uncomfortable history with the iconic Bay blanket, but the retailer still sells all those blankets, and the same pattern on coats and jackets and t-shirts, whatever. Hey, First Nations people, we started out as a company screwing you over. Why shouldn't we continue to offend you in any way we can? They had their day too, didn't they, huh? Hudson's Bay, the Bay. They had Bay Days. They were the big stores that anchored the big malls. But today, it's a struggling old Canadian company, and by the way, owned by an American equity partner firm. It's an entirely new retail landscape, and stores are closing fast, faster than you can say overpriced. In Winnipeg, that store was shuttered and declared a heritage site. It is quite a building. It's awesome. It was donated to the city to be repurposed. In my old hometown of Saskatoon, the famous downtown bay is now a condo. That's right. My college friend Dave now lives in ladies' lingerie. All the corpses in the department store graveyard, Eaton's, Simpson's, Sears, Woolco, Kmart, others, they wonder each morning if this will be the day that the bay pulls up in a hearse. But somehow they hang on. Closer to where I live now, there was a mall that had a big bay store at the end. It actually converted to a Zellers. And then Zellers closed and it became a Target. After sitting empty for a couple of years, it became a COVID vaccination clinic. Bay, Zellers, Target, COVID. I've actually received product from all four of those at that location. So late last year, the geniuses at HBC said, hey, why don't we revive Zellers? We still own the brand. We bought it in the 70s. It only took us about 30 years to drive it into the ground. Maybe there's something there people might be interested in. Zellers was successful in its day. It did a lot of things right. They attacked the suburbs. Their slogan was, the lowest price is the law. Merchandise was still quality. Well, of a quality. They had one of the first loyalty programs, Club Z points. Club Z, not Club Z. We're Canadians, damn it. It had a thrifty and tasty lunch counter. And who could forget Zeddy Bear, the adorable mascot?
Cheer up, Santa. There's Zellers Toyland.
Zeddy, that's a great idea.
Only one store has the law of Zellers Toyland.
Well, yes, why not revive that? I hope that HBC understands, and there's no guarantee that they do, that Zellers was a successful department store before all those retail game changers came along. Walmart, which back in the day was barely making inroads into Canada. Add to that now Amazon, even Costco. Those are the top three retail giants. Add to that the proliferation of dollar stores, Giant Tiger et al. So here's what the new forest looks like, Zeddy Bear. Good luck finding sustenance. I mean, competing against Walmart alone, come on. Walmart, by the way, does about twice the retail business of Amazon. Walmart, man, I just popped in for some chicken breasts and a loaf of bread. Sunglasses, 3 liters of motor oil, a lawn chair, some Advil, rain boots, and a bag of garden fertilizer. Boy, talk about your one-stop shopping. Once Walmart got into groceries, well, forget about it. Loblaws Grocery had to get into department store products and pharmacy. Pharmacies had to get into food products. I still buy my eggs and cheese at the drugstore. Usually they have the best price. It's a complicated business, this. And now enter, or re-enter, Zellers. And this return of Zellers, well, there's no standalone stores. Only a few select markets where Zellers is actually inside the bay. Leave it to HBC to take a good idea and do it half-assed. And what's more is that these cordoned-off Zellers zones in the bay will offer many of the same department store items available at the bay. The price point at the bay might be higher than that at Zellers in the same area. HBC is trying to leverage nostalgia into a successful retail model without spending too much money on it, just in case it doesn't work out. Sounds like a plan. Oh, I'm sure nostalgia will get a lot of people into the store. Question is, will you buy anything And will you keep coming back again and again? At least it might get traffic back into the Bay, even if it's only to check out the Zellers. Marketing experts I've contacted say that's the real goal here. Increase foot traffic into the Bay stores. I mean, hey, have you been to a Bay lately? There's still a big Bay store at a major mall near me. And that end of the mall, the Bayside, the parking lot is always empty. So instead of trying to find a space, I just park there and then cut through the Bay to get to the mall. The Bay, a ghost town. Echo chamber, echo chamber. More mannequins than customers. Always looks really nice though, very expensive to put all this together. But apparently there's no one there spending money. Well, that's just not sustainable. And the demographic that may have some traditional ties to supporting that brand, the Bay, well, they're older now and most of them can no longer afford to shop there. And more, the Bay is not carrying those products that the demographic might even be interested in. A similar retail chain from America, Nordstrom's, just announced they are closing all their shops and abandoning Canada. I mean, they lasted longer than Target. It was a different market, but ultimately, same result. It's tough out there. We also lost Bed Bath & Beyond. Or in Canada now, we call it Bad Death and Begone. So maybe Zellers might improve the Bay's or HBC's bottom line. Each section of the Bay that'll be called Zellers will be about 10,000 square feet. By the way, the average Walmart supercenter, about 190,000 square feet. I guess Zellers, by comparison, is going to be some thrifty little boutique business. The previous iteration of Zellers was shuttered by HBC in 2013. Although, it seems longer ago, doesn't it? Target came in shortly after that, occupied a lot of those Zellers properties. They lasted barely 2 years. As I said, it seems that Zellers was closed for a long time. So much so that in 2018, I was around this older mall, and off to the side towards the back of the parking lot, I see this Zellers sign. Wow, didn't even bother to take down the old sign, I thought. So I wandered over there, I thought I'd get a picture of it. And through the doors, I see a store with people in it. I walk in, and there's another big Zellers sign over the entrance. There's merchandise. It's a big space. But you can see the whole store because everything is on these low racks and piled onto tables. A salesperson walks by, and she's got a Zellers name tag. I stop her, and I ask, "Excuse me, what year is this? What time warp have I entered? Is there an exit portal? Will I ever see my family again?" She says to me, "Oh yeah, this is a Zellers." I was like, "I thought you closed." She said, "Well, we never closed. There's actually 2 Zellers stores left in the entire country of Canada. This one in the GTA and one in Ottawa. The Bay uses them as liquidation centers." So I mosey around, and yeah, there was a lot of junk. But as every bargain shopper knows, within that rubbish, there will be gems. They had men's and women's clothing, shoes. At the back, they had some appliances and furniture. I bought a couple of designer neckties for like $3 each. Cool jacket for $20. I called my good friend, a fellow shopper, said, "I found a Zellers." She's like, "I'll be right over." And for the next couple of years, that was our routine. We'd get together for coffee every couple of weeks, and then Zellers. "You want to go to Zellers?" "Oh yeah." Didn't always purchase something, but always did a few laps. I was like, wow, I've been living a 10-minute drive from one of the last remaining Zellers stores on Earth. People would say, "Nice tie, Larry." And I would say, "Yeah, I just bought it at Zellers last week." And they're like, "Zellers? What are you talking about? Zellers closed years ago." And then I would tell them the story. About 6 months into COVID, I heard they finally closed both of those last 2 Zellers. Zellers gone forever. But now, a couple of years later, the rebirth. Leveraging nostalgia. It usually works, but not for long. You know why? Nostalgia is a great place to visit, but not too many people want to live there. I am here to tell you this is my prediction. The Zellers thing is very temporary. Perhaps even designed to be so. if I thought that HBC was that bright. It's like an HBC pop-up store experiment. They'll be gone in 6 months. Maybe they'll limp it through to Christmas, but that's it. HBC is like, let's do this thing, and then it'll be gone again, and likely the next time forever. It's like the VW Beetle of retail. Hey, let's make this thing again. Great! But then the novelty wears off, and it's discontinued. I know the parade just started, and I'm already raining on it. Sorry, but hey, let's be real. It's all about the good old days mentality. A memory of Zellers. And all dutifully reported as a news story by the gung-ho news media. But here's a part of the Zellers history I don't hear a lot of information about. In the 1980s, Zellers sold counterfeit video games for the Atari 2600 gaming system. These were manufactured in Taiwan, usually with slightly modified graphics, partially altered artwork, and sometimes with new names. All of these games were pirated copies of games created by Atari or a contracted third party like Activision. Zellers released about 18 different games and were eventually ordered by Atari to take them off shelves. To give you a brief context, mid-70s, the Atari 2600 was the home gaming system.
The Atari video computer system is 20 cartridges with 1,300 game variations you play on your own TV set.
Then slowly the Commodore 64 and ColecoVision made inroads into their market. Commodore and Coleco were more expensive, so most people still had the Atari. Problem was, each game cartridge was like $40. No kid has $40. So you gotta wait for generous relatives during birthdays and Christmas. But along comes these bootleg cartridges, and they fit and work with the Atari gaming system. There was no Atari Defender, but an almost identical game called Earth Attack. Not Dragon Fire, but Dragon Treasure. Atari Atlantis? No. But how about Ocean City Defender? And Zellers could sell them at a profit, not for $40, but for about $7. And they did, until the lawyers told them to stop. How could Zellers, a multi-chain, multinational company, get hoodwinked? Or did they know all along and just didn't care? Hey, just sell the bootlegs for $7 each. They did it for many years, like I said, until the Atari lawyers told them to stop. And here's what's interesting. Collectors will tell you these days that you can get an original Atari cartridge at a store or a flea market for about $7. But those bootleg copies from Taiwan that you used to get at Zellers, they're now valued at around $60. And if you ask HBC, they will say, oh, sorry, we don't seem to have that as part of our Zellers heritage records. Of course you don't. You don't have that apostrophe, as in you refuse to own that story. I was thinking maybe that might be a cool nostalgic section to have in those new Zellers stores. An entire display of pirated video games. Or, maybe some things are best forgotten. Hey, this is a completely separate aside. Shortly after that small Atari victory over Zellers, they would come out with a game that has become legend as the worst video game in history. E.T. E.T., the Atari video game, has become classic and valued for its gross ineptitude. Myth grew around a story about an Atari million-game E.T. landfill dump. They did an excavation and film about this in 2014 that was partly funded by Microsoft. The excavation proved the myth to be only partly true. The excavation did find E.T. games along with old Atari joysticks and other component parts. I don't want to get too far into this tangent, but the whole Atari E.T. landfill story is really cool if you ever have a chance to look it up. Point is, people also lost interest in Atari. But even Atari had the sense to say, we should just throw ourselves in a landfill. Today, only the geeks and collectors have any interest in bringing Atari back. But no, not Zellers. In the name of commerce, we are going to insert ourselves back into the lives of people. You know who made a lot of money with Zellers? My friend Dan. My friend Dan had a very successful second career as a voiceover talent. He was the voice of the Zellers commercials for many years.
Starting this Wednesday, September 19th, and for the remainder of the week, only one store is uncovering fantastic savings. Zellers. Sleep on this. Zellers has twin sheets now at only $9.97. Also available in double and queen sizes. And you'll have even sweeter dreams with free valuable Club Z points. So next time you want to catch some Z's, make sure that the first one on your list is Zellers.
So that's Dan. He'd come into the studio, record a couple of Zellers commercials, and he'd get paid like a couple of $1,000s. The thing is, if suddenly, Byway advertised that same bedding for 50 cents less, the very next week they had to bring Dan in and re-record the commercials. And this happened all the time. Zellers just kept paying Dan because the lowest price is the law. As I said earlier, I think the callback of Zellers is temporary. It is a pop-up store. It's pure novelty, nostalgia, until we discover that old adage is true. Nostalgia just ain't what it used to be. You can never go back. Plus, I also believe that the lowest price is no longer the law. The Supreme Court of Retail ruled on that in 1986, I think it was. It's a famous case of Buyer versus Beware.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.